The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the endless black canvas of space. Earth, once a lonely planet tucked away in a quiet corner of the galaxy, now found itself at the center of an interstellar storm. For years, humanity had lived peacefully alongside the Valoran, an alien species known for their wisdom and advanced technology. The Valorans were not warriors but diplomats, beings who valued harmony over conflict. Their alliance with Earth had brought prosperity and knowledge, bridging gaps between worlds that once seemed insurmountable. But peace, as history often reminded, was fragile. Daniel Carter stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, his hands gripping the railing tightly. Below him, the blue-green orb of Earth spun silently, oblivious to the chaos brewing beyond its atmosphere. He had been called here urgently, summoned by leaders who feared the worst. The Galactic War Council, a coalition of aggressive alien factions, had grown increasingly hostile toward the Valorans. Accusations flew back and forth, secrets withheld, hidden weapons, plots to destabilize the galaxy. Daniel didn't trust any of it. Something felt off. "Commander," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Emily Dawson, a young intelligence officer with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She approached him cautiously, holding a data tablet in her hand. "You need to see this." Daniel turned, his expression grim. "What is it?" Emily hesitated before speaking. "Intercepted transmissions from the Council. They're planning something big. Against the Valorans." He took the tablet from her, scanning through the fragmented messages. Each word sent a chill down his spine. The Council wasn't just accusing the Valorans of treachery. They were preparing for war. And if what Emily had uncovered was true, the attack would come sooner rather than later. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Officers rushed past, shouting orders and barking commands into their communicators. Daniel's heart sank. This was it, the moment they had all dreaded. "Get me to the command center," he said firmly, already moving toward the nearest lift. Emily followed closely behind, clutching the tablet tightly. When they arrived, the room was a flurry of activity. Screens displayed live feeds from across the solar system, showing fleets mobilizing and ships changing course. At the center of it all stood Ryan Mitchell, a pilot whose fiery temper matched his skills in combat. His face was pale, almost ghostly, as he turned to face Daniel. "They hit them," Ryan said, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "The Council. They attacked the Valoran homeworld." Daniel froze, the weight of those words crushing him. The Valorans, peaceful and unprepared for such brutality, wouldn't have stood a chance. Images began streaming in. A planet engulfed in flames, cities reduced to rubble, billions of lives wiped out in an instant. It was a massacre, plain and simple. Kale, one of the few Valoran ambassadors stationed on Earth, entered the room moments later. His tall, slender frame sagged under the weight of despair. Tears streaked down his smooth, silver skin as he whispered, "They've destroyed us." No one spoke. There were no words to ease the pain or undo the devastation. The alliance that had once promised so much hope now lay in ruins. Humanity's closest friends had been betrayed and annihilated. But worse still, Earth itself was now vulnerable. Daniel clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. The Galactic War Council had made a grave mistake. They thought they could crush the Valorans without consequence, assuming humanity would cower in fear. But they underestimated the resolve of Earth's defenders. "We strike back," Daniel said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. "For the Valorans. For Earth. We don't let this stand." The room fell silent, every eye turning to him. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. One by one, the defenders of Earth united under a single purpose: to fight back against the forces that sought to destroy everything they held dear. Emily Dawson sat in the dimly lit communications room, her fingers flying over the keyboard as lines of encrypted data scrolled across the screen. The intercepted transmissions from the Galactic War Council were complex, but she had always been good at puzzles. Bit by bit, she began piecing together the truth. What she uncovered made her blood run cold. The Council hadn't just attacked the Valorans out of suspicion or paranoia. They had fabricated evidence against them. It was a setup, a deliberate act to justify their aggression. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the information on the screen. Her mind raced with questions. Why would the Council go to such lengths? What did they stand to gain by destroying the Valorans and targeting Earth next? Emily knew this wasn't just about war. It was about control. If the Council could eliminate anyone who stood in their way, they'd have free reign over the galaxy. But exposing their lies wouldn't be easy. Someone needed to believe her, and fast. Daniel. She called out as she spotted Commander Daniel Carter walking past the open doorway. He stopped and turned, his face still lined with exhaustion from the previous day's horrors. When he saw the urgency in her eyes, he stepped inside without hesitation. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharp but not unkind. Emily motioned for him to sit. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I decrypted more of those messages," she said, pulling up the data on a larger display. The Council manipulated everything. They planted fake intel to make the Valorans look like a threat. This wasn't self-defense. It was planned. Daniel studied the screen, his jaw tightening with each passing second. The implications were staggering. If the Council had gone so far as to manufacture evidence, then no one was safe. Not the Valorans, not Earth, not anyone who dared oppose them. Betrayal cut deeper than any weapon, and this betrayal reached far beyond the stars. "We need to share this," Daniel said finally, rising from his seat. "If we can prove they lied, maybe we can rally support. Maybe other species will see the truth." But even as he spoke, doubt lingered in his voice. Trust was hard to come by in the galaxy, especially when fear ruled supreme. Would anyone listen? Or would they dismiss it as propaganda? Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell sat alone in the medical bay, his leg propped up on a cushioned bench. A healing patch covered the burn wound he'd sustained during a training exercise weeks ago, but the injury wasn't what weighed on his mind. Images of the Valoran homeworld burning replayed in his head like a broken recording. He couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. Kale, the Valoran ambassador, had become a friend over the months they'd worked together. Now Kel's entire civilization was gone, wiped out in a single brutal strike. Ryan clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. He hated feeling useless, stuck here while others prepared for battle. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to fight back, but the doctors had grounded him until he healed. Orders were orders, but Ryan had never been good at following rules. As if sensing his turmoil, Kale entered the room. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by raw grief, yet there was also a flicker of determination in his glowing eyes. "Ryan," he said softly, taking the seat beside him. "I know you want to help. We all do." Ryan looked away, unable to meet Kel's gaze. "Help? How?" "Sitting here doesn't change anything." Kale placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, surprising him with the gesture. "You are stronger than you think. Your anger, it fuels you. Use it wisely." Before Ryan could respond, an announcement echoed through the station. "All personnel report to the main briefing hall immediately." The voice belonged to Samantha Brooks, the strategist leading Earth's defense efforts. Whatever she had to say, it was important. Ryan grabbed his crutches and pushed himself to his feet. Pain shot through his leg, but he ignored it. Kale followed silently, offering quiet support. Together, they joined the growing crowd streaming toward the briefing hall. When they arrived, the room buzzed with tension. Samantha stood at the front, her expression grave. On the large screen behind her, images of the destroyed Valoran cities flashed alongside maps of the Council's military outposts. "We cannot wait for them to come to us," Samantha began, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "If we strike first, we might stand a chance. But this won't be easy. We'll need every ship, every pilot, and every ounce of courage we can muster." Ryan felt a spark ignite within him. This was his chance to honor Cal's people, to fight back against the monsters who had taken everything from them. Rules be damned. He raised his hand, catching Samantha's attention. "I'm in," he said firmly. "Grounded or not, I'm not sitting this out." Samantha hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But don't let your emotions get you killed." As the meeting continued, plans took shape. Humanity's defenders weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for justice. And for Ryan, that made all the difference. The briefing hall fell silent as Samantha Brooks outlined her plan. Her voice was calm but firm, each word carrying the weight of their dire situation. Earth's defenders couldn't afford to wait for the Galactic War Council to regroup and launch another attack. They needed to strike first, targeting one of the Council's key outposts, a heavily fortified station that served as a supply hub for their fleet. If they could cripple it, they might buy themselves enough time to rally allies and prepare for a larger counteroffensive. But the mission wouldn't be easy. The outpost was deep in enemy territory, surrounded by patrols and protected by layers of defenses. Samantha proposed using cloaked ships provided by the surviving Valorans, who still had access to advanced technology despite their losses. These ships could slip past enemy sensors undetected, giving the team a slim chance of success. It was risky, but it was their best shot. Daniel Carter listened intently, his arms crossed over his chest. He knew the odds were stacked against them. Even with the cloaking technology, infiltrating such a well-guarded location would require precision and luck. One wrong move, and the entire operation would collapse. But what choice did they have? Sitting back and waiting for the Council to make the next move wasn't an option. "What about reinforcements?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. "If we're discovered, we'll need backup." Samantha shook her head. "We can't risk sending more than a small team. The Council has spies everywhere. A larger force would draw too much attention. This has to be quick and quiet." Ryan Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his crutches resting against the wall beside him. His legs still throbbed, but he refused to let pain slow him down. When Samantha mentioned forming a task force for the mission, Ryan volunteered immediately. "I'm going," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Samantha raised an eyebrow. "You're injured. You shouldn't even be here." "I don't care," Ryan shot back. "Those bastards destroyed Cal's people. I'm not sitting this out." Cal, standing quietly near the back of the room, stepped forward. "Let him go," he said softly. "Ryan is strong. He will not falter." Samantha hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. She turned her attention to Emily Dawson, who had been analyzing maps of the outpost. "Emily, you'll handle navigation and communications. We'll need someone sharp to keep us off their radar." Emily nodded, her expression focused. "Understood." With the team decided, preparations began in earnest. Supplies were gathered, ships were prepped, and last-minute strategies were reviewed. The cloaked vessels, sleek and silent, waited in the hangar like shadows ready to slip into the void. Each member of the task force carried the weight of their mission on their shoulders, knowing failure meant not just their deaths, but potentially the end of humanity's resistance. As they prepared to depart, Cal approached Ryan one final time. His silver skin glimmered faintly under the harsh lights of the hangar. "Do not let your anger blind you," he said gently. "Fight for hope, not vengeance." Ryan met his gaze, nodding slowly. "I won't let you down." The journey through space was tense and quiet. The cloaked ships moved silently, weaving through asteroid fields and avoiding known patrol routes. Inside the lead vessel, Daniel sat in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen. Stars stretched endlessly before them, beautiful yet indifferent to the chaos unfolding below. Emily monitored the ship's systems, her fingers dancing across the console as she adjusted their course to avoid detection. Hours passed without incident, But the tension grew thicker with every passing moment. They were close now, too close to turn back. As the outpost came into view, its massive structure looming like a fortress among the stars, Ryan felt his heart race. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. "Everyone ready?" Daniel asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. One by one, the team confirmed their readiness. There was no turning back now. They had a job to do, and failure wasn't an option. For Earth, for the Valorans, and for everyone else caught in the Council's crosshairs, they would fight. And they would win, or die trying. The outpost loomed ahead, its jagged metal surface bristling with weapons turrets and docking bays. It was a fortress in space, designed to intimidate and destroy. The team aboard the cloaked ships stayed silent, their nerves stretched tight as they approached the massive structure. Daniel Carter sat at the helm of the lead vessel, his hand steady on the controls despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Emily Dawson monitored the ship's systems, her eyes flicking between screens as she ensured their cloaking technology held firm. "We're within range," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "But there's heavy traffic near the docking bay. We'll need to time this perfectly." Daniel nodded, his focus unwavering. "Stay sharp. If we lose the cloak, we're done." Ryan Mitchell shifted in his seat, gripping the edge of his console tightly. His legs still ached, but he ignored the pain, focusing instead on the mission ahead. He glanced at Cull, who stood nearby, watching the view screen with quiet determination. Ryan felt a surge of guilt when he thought about the Valoran homeworld, now reduced to ashes. This outpost wasn't just a target. It was a symbol of everything the Council had taken from them. "Here's our window," Emily said suddenly, pointing to a gap in the patrol routes. "We can slip through now, but we'll have only 10 seconds before another patrol sweeps the area." "Let's move," Daniel ordered, guiding the ship forward with precision. The others followed closely behind, their vessels gliding silently through the void. For a moment, it seemed like they might make it undetected. Then, alarms blared faintly in the distance. "They'd spotted something," Cale said, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Not us, but close enough to draw attention." "Keep calm," Daniel replied, though his jaw tightened. "Stick to the plan." The team split into two groups once they reached the outpost. Daniel led one group toward the central control hub, where they hoped to disable the station's shields and communications. Ryan volunteered for the other task, a solo mission to sabotage the outpost's power core. It was the most dangerous job, requiring him to navigate narrow maintenance tunnels filled with hazards and guards. But Ryan didn't hesitate. He knew what was at stake. As he crawled through the dimly lit passages, his movements were careful and deliberate. Every sound echoed loudly, threatening to give away his position. Sweat dripped down his face as he pushed forward, his injured leg protesting every step. Finally, he reached the power core chamber. The room was guarded by two armed sentries, their weapons trained on the entrance. Ryan took a deep breath, then acted. Using a small EMP device provided by the Valorans, he triggered a brief power outage in the corridor outside. The sudden darkness caught the guards off guard, giving Ryan just enough time to slip past them unnoticed. He planted explosives around the base of the power core, setting the timer for 5 minutes. As soon as the charges were in place, he turned to leave, but froze when he heard voices echoing down the tunnel. "They're here somewhere," one of the guards growled. "Search every corner." Ryan's heart pounded as he pressed himself against the wall, hidden in the shadows. He waited until the footsteps passed, then bolted back the way he came. The explosives would do their job, but he needed to get clear before they detonated. Time was running out. Meanwhile, Daniel's group faced challenges of their own. They encountered resistance while trying to access the control hub, forcing them into a tense firefight. Emily remained focused, hacking into the system to override security protocols, while Daniel and the others covered her. Bullets ricocheted off walls, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. but they refused to retreat. "We're in," Emily exclaimed finally, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Shields are down, and I've disrupted their comms." A loud explosion rocked the outpost moments later, shaking the entire structure. The lights flickered, and emergency sirens wailed throughout the corridors. Ryan's distraction had worked. The power core was gone, crippling the station's defenses. "Fall back," Daniel ordered over the comm. "Mission accomplished. Let's get out of here." As the team regrouped and raced toward their ships, they knew the hardest part was yet to come. The Galactic War Council wouldn't let this attack go unanswered. But for now, they had struck a blow. A reminder that Earth's defenders weren't afraid to fight back. The outpost was in chaos. Smoke filled the corridors, and emergency lights cast eerie red glows across the damaged halls. The explosion that destroyed the power core had sent shockwaves through the entire structure, knocking out critical systems and plunging parts of the station into darkness. Alarms blared relentlessly, their shrill tones echoing off the metal walls as panicked voices shouted orders over comm channels. The Galactic War Council's forces scrambled to respond, but confusion reigned supreme. Ryan Mitchell sprinted through the dimly lit tunnels, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His injured leg burned with every step, but he pushed through the pain, knowing that stopping meant capture, or worse. Behind him, the sound of boots echoed down the passage. Guards were closing in fast. "Move faster," Ryan muttered under his breath, clutching his crutches tighter. He reached a junction and paused for a split second, listening for the direction of the pursuit. To his left, the noise grew louder. To his right, there was silence. Without hesitation, he turned right, limping as quickly as he could toward the rendezvous point. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter's group fought their way back to the docking bay. The control hub mission had been successful. Shields were down, communications disrupted, but their escape route was anything but clear. Enemy soldiers poured into the area, firing blindly in an attempt to stop the intruders. Daniel led his team with precision, using cover to shield them from incoming fire while Emily coordinated their retreat. "Keep moving," Daniel shouted, ducking behind a fallen support beam as energy blasts sizzled past. "We're almost there." Emily stayed close to him, clutching her data tablet tightly. She had downloaded vital information from the control hub before leaving, files that might expose the Council's true motives. Her mind raced with possibilities. If they could get this intel back to Earth, it could turn the tide of the war. But first, they had to survive. As they neared the docking bay, Cale joined them, having provided backup during their withdrawal. His presence was a comfort, even though his grief lingered just beneath the surface. "The ships are ready," he said urgently, "but we must hurry. Reinforcements are inbound." Daniel nodded grimly. They burst into the docking bay moments later, finding Ryan already there, leaning heavily on his crutches. His face was pale, streaked with sweat and soot, but his eyes gleamed with determination. "You made it," Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. "Barely," Ryan replied, his tone clipped. "Let's not stick around for thank you speeches." The team boarded their cloaked vessels, engines roaring to life as they prepared to leave. As they lifted off, enemy fighters swarmed the area, drawn by the commotion. Laser fire lit up the void, narrowly missing the escaping ships. Emily worked frantically at her console, recalibrating the cloaking devices to ensure they remained undetected. "We're losing them," one of the pilots called out as the cloaked ships slipped into the asteroid field surrounding the outpost. The rocky terrain provided natural cover, masking their escape from the pursuing fleet. Back on Earth, Samantha Brooks monitored their progress from the command center. Her hands hovered over the controls, ready to deploy reinforcements if needed. So far, the team had managed to stay ahead of the Council's forces, but she knew the danger wasn't over yet. Every second felt like an eternity as she waited for confirmation that they were safe. Finally, a transmission crackled through the speakers. It was Daniel. "Mission complete. We're en route home. Samantha exhaled sharply, letting the tension drain from her body. Good work. Get back safely. On board the lead ship, Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had struck a blow against the Council, crippling one of their key outposts and stealing valuable intelligence. But the cost weighed heavily on all of them. Lives had been lost, sacrifices made, and the road ahead promised more hardship. Cale stood quietly near the rear of the ship, gazing out at the stars. His thoughts drifted to his people, now gone forever. Yet amidst the sorrow, he felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had shown courage and resolve, standing alongside the Valorans, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. They will pay for what they've done, Cale said softly, his voice steady despite the pain. Not today, but soon. Ryan glanced at him, nodding slowly. Yeah. And when that day comes, we'll be ready. The ships disappeared into the vastness of space, carrying wounded warriors and stolen secrets. Their mission had succeeded, but the war was far from over. For now, though, they had proven something important. Earth's defenders would fight, not just for themselves, but for everyone who refused to bow to tyranny. The team returned to Earth battered but triumphant. Their ships descended through the atmosphere, leaving streaks of fire in the sky as they approached the orbital station. Inside the lead vessel, Daniel Carter sat quietly, his hands resting on his knees. He stared out the viewport at the blue-green orb below, feeling a mix of pride and sorrow. They had struck a blow against the Galactic War Council, but it came at a cost. Cal's people were gone, and the scars of war ran deep. As soon as the ships docked, Samantha Brooks was there to greet them. Her sharp eyes scanned the group, noting their weary expressions and torn uniforms. "Report," she said simply, wasting no time on pleasantries. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his bones. "Mission accomplished. The outpost is crippled, and we've got intel that could expose the Council's plans." He handed her a data drive containing the files Emily had retrieved from the control hub. Samantha took the drive, her fingers brushing against its smooth surface. "Good work, but this isn't over yet. The Council will retaliate, and we need to be ready." Ryan limped off the ship with the help of his crutches, his legs still stiff and sore. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with determination, refusing to show weakness. Cale followed close behind, his tall frame stooped slightly under the weight of grief. Together, they joined the others in the debriefing room. Emily Dawson stood near the front of the room, projecting images onto a large screen. The files she had downloaded revealed horrifying truths, plans for mass extermination, lists of targeted species, and detailed strategies for galactic domination. It was clear now. The Council didn't just want power, they wanted control over every living being in the galaxy. "This changes everything," Samantha said, pacing back and forth as she absorbed the information. "If we can get this intel out, other species might join our fight. But releasing it won't be easy. The Council has spies everywhere." Cale spoke up, his voice soft but firm. "We must try. My people are gone, but their sacrifice will not be in vain. Others deserve to know the truth." Everyone nodded in agreement. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of their task settling heavily on their shoulders. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. Later that evening, Ryan found himself alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. His mind replayed the events of the mission. The explosions, the narrow escapes, the faces of the fallen. He clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. But then he remembered Cal's words. Fight for hope, not vengeance. A gentle voice broke the silence. "You did well," Cale said, joining him by the window. "Your courage saved many lives today." Ryan shook his head. "It doesn't feel like enough. Too many are already gone." Cale placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "War is never fair, but what matters is how we respond. You chose to stand with us when no one else would. That means something. Ryan looked at him, seeing the pain in his glowing eyes. For the first time, he realized that Kale wasn't just mourning his people. He was carrying the burden of survival. What happens now? Ryan asked. We rebuild, Kale replied. And we prepare. The council thinks they've won, but they've underestimated humanity. Together, we'll show them what we're capable of. Back in the command center, Daniel and Samantha worked tirelessly to analyze the stolen data. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of the Council's ambitions and their vulnerabilities. If they played their cards right, they could turn the tide of the war. But timing was crucial. One misstep, and the Council would crush them. As the hours passed, Emily joined them, her energy undiminished despite the long day. There's more here than we thought, she said excitedly. Hidden codes, encrypted messages. I think I can trace their supply lines. If we hit them where it hurts, we might cripple their operations entirely. Daniel smiled faintly, impressed by her determination. Do it. We'll need every advantage we can get. The night wore on, and the station buzzed with activity. Soldiers prepared for battle. Engineers repaired damaged ships, and strategists plotted their next move. Outside, the stars twinkled innocently, unaware of the storm brewing below. Humanity had taken its first step toward becoming guardians of the galaxy, but the hardest battles were yet to come. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet resolve. They had faced the darkness and survived. And as long as they stood together, they would keep fighting. For Earth, for the Valorans, and for everyone who refused to give up hope. The stolen intel spread quickly, lighting a fire across the galaxy. Earth's leaders released the data publicly, exposing the Galactic War Council's lies and atrocities. The reaction was immediate and intense. Protests erupted on dozens of planets, with species once too frightened to act now demanding justice for the Valorans and protection from the Council's tyranny. Images of the destroyed Valoran homeworld circulated widely, fueling outrage and solidarity. On Earth, the response was overwhelming. Crowds filled the streets, holding banners that read, "For the Fallen," and "No More Silence." Voices rose in unison, chanting slogans against oppression. Even those who had doubted the war effort before were moved to join the cause. Samantha Brooks watched the news feeds from the command center, her heart swelling with cautious optimism. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. They had allies willing to fight alongside them. But unity came at a price. The Council struck back almost instantly, launching raids on several neutral colonies to send a message. Resistance would not be tolerated. Ships descended upon undefended settlements, leaving destruction in their wake. The message was clear: submit or face annihilation. Yet, instead of cowing others into submission, these attacks only strengthened the resolve of Earth's defenders. Daniel Carter stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic maps of the galaxy. Plans were taking shape for a bold counterattack, one that would target multiple Council strongholds simultaneously. Samantha paced the room, her mind racing through possibilities. We need to hit them hard and fast, she said firmly. If we can disrupt their supply lines and weaken their fleets, we'll give ourselves breathing room. Emily Dawson sat nearby, poring over the decrypted files she'd been analyzing. Her discovery of hidden supply routes had proven invaluable, and now she worked tirelessly to identify weak points in the Council's defenses. Here, she said, pointing to a cluster of outposts on the map. These are critical hubs. Take them out, and their operations will collapse. Ryan Mitchell listened intently, his legs still healing but his spirit undeterred. He knew this plan meant more battles, more risks. But he also knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. When Samantha turned to him, asking if he was ready to lead another mission, he didn't hesitate. I'm in, he said, his voice steady. Let's finish what we started. Kale remained a constant presence, offering guidance and tactical advice based on his knowledge of the Council's infrastructure. Though grief still lingered in his eyes, he carried himself with quiet strength, inspiring those around him. This is our chance, he told Daniel privately, to show the galaxy that hope is stronger than fear. Preparations moved swiftly. Ships were refitted, weapons upgraded, and troops trained for the challenges ahead. Morale among the defenders was high, bolstered by the growing coalition of allies. Species once divided by mistrust now stood united under a single banner, the fight for freedom. As the launch date approached, tension hung thick in the air. Everyone understood the stakes. Failure would mean the end, not just for Earth, but for countless others who looked to them for leadership. Success, however, could turn the tide of the war. The night before the operation, Ryan found himself once again in the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly before him, silent witnesses to the chaos unfolding below. Kale joined him after a while, standing silently beside him. Neither spoke for a long time, content to share the quiet moment. "You're afraid," Kale said finally, breaking the silence. Ryan nodded. "Yeah, but not for me. For everyone else. What if we mess this up?" Kale smiled faintly. "Fear is natural. It reminds us what we stand to lose. But remember, you're not fighting alone. You carry the hopes of many." The words stayed with Ryan as he returned to his quarters, preparing mentally for the battle ahead. Across the station, similar scenes played out. Soldiers checked their gear, pilots reviewed flight plans, and engineers made last-minute adjustments to the ships. Each person knew their role, each person ready to give everything for the cause. When dawn broke, the fleet assembled in orbit, a formidable armada representing the combined strength of humanity and its allies. As the ships powered up and prepared to jump into hyperspace, Daniel addressed the crew over the comms. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for every being who believes in peace and justice. Let's make them proud." With that, the fleet surged forward, disappearing into the void. Ahead lay danger and uncertainty, but also the promise of victory. The defenders of Earth had chosen their path, and nothing would stop them from seeing it through. The battle began with a flash of light as Earth's fleet emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the first of the Council's supply hubs. The outpost loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette cutting against the endless black of space. It was heavily guarded, bristling with weapons turrets and patrolling ships. For a moment, there was silence, a tense pause before chaos erupted. "Engage," Daniel Carter ordered over the comms, his voice calm but firm. The order rippled through the fleet like a spark igniting dry tinder. Ships broke formation, diving toward their targets with precision and purpose. Energy blasts lit up the void as pilots unleashed volleys of fire, targeting enemy vessels and defensive systems. Explosions blossomed in the darkness, sending debris spiraling into the emptiness. Ryan Mitchell led one squadron, his fighter darting through the fray with reckless speed. His injured leg throbbed painfully against the controls, but he ignored it, focusing instead on the mission. Around him, other pilots followed his lead, weaving between enemy ships and dodging return fire. Every movement was calculated, every shot deliberate. They couldn't afford mistakes. Not here, not now. "Watch your six," came a voice over the comm, warning of an incoming attack. Ryan banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have torn his ship apart. He retaliated instantly, firing a missile that struck the enemy vessel square in its engines. The ship exploded in a brilliant burst of light, momentarily illuminating the battlefield. Back aboard the command ship, Emily Dawson worked furiously at her station, coordinating fleet movements and relaying critical information to the pilots. Her fingers flew across the console, adjusting strategies on the fly as new threats emerged. "Sector 3 is clear," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension. "Redirect squadrons to reinforce Sector 5. Samantha Brooks stood nearby, overseeing the operation with sharp eyes. She trusted Emily's instincts implicitly, knowing her quick thinking could mean the difference between victory and defeat. As reports poured in from across the battlefield, Samantha felt a flicker of hope. The defenders were holding their own, even gaining ground against overwhelming odds. But the fight wasn't without cost. Enemy reinforcements arrived unexpectedly, swarming the area with fresh ships. Pilots screamed warnings over the comms as the tide shifted dangerously. One by one, Allied vessels fell, their wreckage drifting silently among the stars. Ryan gritted his teeth, pushing himself harder. He couldn't let fear take hold, not when so much depended on them. Cale watched the battle unfold from the safety of the command ship, his glowing eyes fixed on the screens. Though he wasn't suited for combat, his presence inspired those around him. When a young officer hesitated during a critical decision, Cale placed a reassuring hand on their shoulder. "Trust yourself," he said softly. "You are stronger than you think." The turning point came when Emily identified a weak spot in the outpost's defenses, a vulnerable hangar bay left exposed during the fighting. With precise coordination, 2 assault teams breached the opening, planting explosives deep within the structure. Moments later, a massive explosion rocked the outpost, crippling its ability to function. Cheers erupted across the fleet as the defenders pressed their advantage, dragging the Council's forces into retreat. By the time the dust settled, the outpost was in ruins. Enemy ships fled into the distance, leaving behind a field of debris and destruction. Exhausted but triumphant, the fleet regrouped, tending to the wounded and salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Lives had been lost, sacrifices made, but the mission had succeeded. The Council's grip on the galaxy had been weakened. As the fleet prepared to jump to the next target, Daniel addressed the crew once more. "We've taken one step closer to ending this war," he said, his tone filled with quiet pride. "But our work isn't done yet. Stay sharp, stay strong, and remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who believes in a better future." Ryan leaned back in his cockpit, staring out at the stars. His body ached, his mind buzzed with adrenaline. But he felt something else too. Hope. Against all odds, they had won today. And if they could do it once, they could do it again. Together, humanity and its allies were proving that even in the face of tyranny, courage and unity could prevail. The aftermath of the battle left Earth's defenders both weary and hopeful. Ships limped back to the orbital station, their hulls scared and battered from the fight. The medical bay overflowed with wounded soldiers, their faces pale but resolute. Despite the losses, there was a sense of victory in the air, a fragile light breaking through the darkness that had loomed over them for so long. Daniel Carter walked among the crew, offering quiet words of gratitude and encouragement. He stopped by the beds of injured pilots, listening to their stories and thanking them for their bravery. Each face reminded him of the cost of war, but also of the strength humanity possessed when pushed to its limits. "We couldn't have done this without you," he said to one young pilot whose arm was wrapped in bandages. The pilot smiled weakly, too tired to speak, but his eyes said enough. Ryan Mitchell sat alone in the hangar, staring at his damaged fighter. Technicians swarmed around it, patching up dents and replacing scorched panels. His leg throbbed painfully, but he refused painkillers, wanting to stay sharp for whatever came next. Cale approached him silently, his presence calming yet heavy with unspoken grief. "You fought well," Cale said, sitting beside Ryan on a nearby crate. "Your actions saved many lives today." Ryan shrugged, avoiding Cale's gaze. "It doesn't feel like enough. Too many are still gone." Cale nodded slowly, understanding the weight of loss. War is never fair, but what matters is how we honor those who fell. Their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Back in the command center, Samantha Brooks reviewed the operation's success with Emily Dawson. Screens displayed maps of the galaxy, showing the Council's weakened strongholds glowing red where they had been hit hardest. "This changes everything," Samantha said, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. "If we keep pushing, we might actually win this." Emily leaned forward, pointing to a cluster of outposts near the edge of Council territory. "These hubs are critical for their supply chains. If we take them out, the Council won't recover easily." Samantha nodded, already planning the next phase of the campaign. We'll need reinforcements, though. Spread the word. Every alley counts now. Word of the victory spread quickly across the galaxy. Species once too afraid to oppose the Council began reaching out, pledging support and resources. Messages poured into Earth's command center, each one filled with promises of aid and solidarity. Humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, and others wanted to stand alongside them. In the days that followed, Earth transformed into a hub of activity. Ships arrived from distant systems, carrying supplies, weapons, and volunteers eager to join the fight. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair and upgrade vessels, while strategists plotted new missions. Morale soared as people realized they weren't fighting alone anymore. They were part of something bigger. Kale took an active role in rebuilding efforts, sharing knowledge about the Council's infrastructure and helping train new recruits. Though his heart still ached for his lost people, he found solace in the unity forming around him. They would be proud, he told Daniel one evening as they stood watching the stars. The Valorans always believed in peace through strength. You embody that ideal. As preparations continued, Ryan found himself reflecting on the journey so far. He had started as just another pilot, angry and unsure of his place in the war. Now he was part of something greater, a movement driven by courage and hope. When he looked at the faces of his fellow defenders, he saw determination shining brightly, even in the darkest moments. The final push against the Council wouldn't be easy. Everyone knew the road ahead was fraught with danger, but they also knew they had come too far to turn back. As ships prepared for the next mission, Daniel gathered the crew for one last briefing. "We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of," he said, his voice steady and full of resolve. "Let's finish this together." With renewed purpose, the fleet launched once more into the void, ready to face whatever lay ahead. For Earth, for the Valorans, and for every being who dreamed of freedom, they would fight until the end. The final battle stretched across the stars like a tapestry of fire and light. Earth's defenders, now joined by allies from across the galaxy, faced the remnants of the Galactic War Council in a desperate clash for control of the cosmos. The enemy fleet gathered near their central command station, a colossal fortress that pulsed with energy, its weapons primed to annihilate anything that dared approach. Daniel Carter led the charge, his voice steady over the comms as he directed the fleet. "Hold formation," he ordered. "We strike hard and fast. Don't let them regroup." The defenders surged forward, their ships weaving through a storm of laser fire and explosions. Ryan Mitchell pushed his fighter to its limits, darting between enemy vessels with reckless precision. His injured leg screamed in protest, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. Around him, pilots from different species fought side by side, their unity turning chaos into coordination. Every shot fired was a statement. They would not back down. Inside the command ship, Emily Dawson monitored the battle with sharp focus, her fingers flying across the console. She identified weak points in the Council's defenses, relaying critical information to the fleet. "Target their shield generators," she called out. "They're vulnerable on the south side." Samantha Brooks stood nearby, watching the screens with intense concentration. She trusted Emily's instincts implicitly, knowing that every second counted. When the shields finally dropped, a cheer erupted across the fleet. It was the opening they needed. Kale played a crucial role, using his knowledge of the Council's technology to guide assault teams deep into the fortress. Armed with stolen codes and cloaking devices, the teams moved silently through the corridors, disabling systems and planting explosives. Cal's glowing eyes reflected both grief and determination as he worked alongside the humans who had become his family. "For my people," he whispered, pressing a detonator. The explosion rocked the fortress, sending shockwaves through its core. Enemy ships faltered, their coordination crumbling as the heart of the Council's power began to collapse. One by one, their forces retreated, fleeing into the void. The defenders pressed their advantage, chasing them down and ensuring no counterattack could form. As the dust settled, the survivors gathered aboard the command ship, Faces were weary but triumphant, their spirits buoyed by the realization that they had won. The Council's reign of terror was over, shattered by the combined strength of those who refused to bow to fear. Daniel addressed the crew, his voice filled with quiet pride. Today we proved that even in the darkest times, hope can prevail. We didn't just fight for ourselves. We fought for everyone who believes in peace and justice. Ryan leaned against the wall, his body aching but his heart swelling with pride. He glanced at Cull, who stood quietly beside him. "Your people would be proud," Ryan said softly. Cale nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "They are, and so am I." In the weeks that followed, Earth emerged as a beacon of hope in the galaxy. Surviving Valorans joined humanity in rebuilding what had been lost, forging a new alliance built on trust and shared purpose. Samantha worked tirelessly to establish treaties, ensuring that such a war would never happen again. Pilots like Ryan became symbols of courage, their stories inspiring future generations. The stars twinkled brightly above, silent witnesses to the struggles and triumphs below. Humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming guardians of the galaxy, not out of ambition, but out of a desire to protect. Together, they vowed to honor the sacrifices made and build a brighter future. And as Daniel looked out at the endless expanse of space, he felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For Earth, for the Valorans, and for the galaxy, they would always stand ready.